Well, again, hello, everybody. My name is William Porter. I'm the host of the Inspirational Book Club and Storytelling Time. This show is sponsored by Every Black Entrepreneurs Network. And so we're going to go ahead and get started with a book lover's prayer. Let the pages be ever turning. Let the words run on and on. May my eyes be ever reading, my imagination ever strong. Let my mind remain wide open to the discoveries within. May I never lose this passion for a story to begin. May the stories, they be plentiful. May I find my cozy nook to ever read and carry on the love of a good book. The story title of our meeting today is Aftermath to Disaster. And it comes from the book Heaven Can't Wait, or Can It, the sequel. This happens to be the second novel that I've written in a series of novels. And the foundation scripture is Job, 14th chapter, the first and the second verse. And it reads, "Man who is born of woman is of few days and full of trouble. He comes forth like a flower and fades away. He flees like a shadow and does not continue." And so at this point, I'd like to go ahead and recognize our participants, and especially our new people. I'd like to recognize, and of course, I talked with him earlier, Mr. Al Herr. He's new here today, but Al, go ahead and tell us your name, which I've already indicated, and tell us where you're calling from, and anything else that you might want to share with us.
Thank you, William. It's really nice to be here with some friendly, smiling faces. This is reminding me of being in a Toastmasters group, which I do every Wednesday, and we do it on Zoom. So all of a sudden, I look frantic, like I need to give a speech. It's because of that. or if I don't know what the time is left. Anyway, I'm calling from the great metropolis of North Raleigh, which is just its own place, really. There must be hundreds of people up here in North Raleigh. And I am a videographer, and I do some public speaking on occasion. And I help Mr. Porter put together his slideshows with his videos for his podcast. So it'll be interesting to see how they work from this point of view. Thank you.
Great. Good to have you. Now, if there is anyone else here that is new to the meeting, you can tell us who you are. And as I survey all of you, I don't think at least the people who I see are new. All of you have been here before. So just tell us your name real quick and where you're calling from. I guess beginning with Sherry. She's next to me on my screen.
Oh, we're just introducing ourselves?
Yeah, your name and where you're calling from.
Alrighty, I'm Sherry McManus, and we're just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina.
Okay. Panya?
Anya Porter from downtown Raleigh, North Carolina.
And Pamela?
Pamela Porter from Southeast Raleigh.
And Ms. Jones?
Oh, hi, I'm Pat Jones, and I'm from right here in North Carolina.
And Verice, go ahead and give us the rest of the information.
Verice Wooten, and I'm calling from Morrisville, right outside of Cary and Apex. 20 minutes from Raleigh, 20 minutes from Durham.
Okay, and Yvonne has joined us, I see. So Yvonne, go ahead and give us your information.
Yvonne from Garner, North Carolina.
Okay. Well, great. Again, it's good to have all of you with us tonight. And we're going to go ahead and get started with the program. So hang on. Okay, we're going to go ahead and look at the audio version of the story, Aftermath to Disaster. And this story, by the way, can be found on my podcast, number 105, and you can find it by going to my website, williamporterlife.com. And it happens to be the third story from chapter 2 of Heaven Can't Wait, or Canon, the sequel. So let's go ahead and take a look at part 1 of podcast 105, Aftermath to Disaster.
Welcome back. When our story ended the last time, Matthew had been lifted onto an ambulance by paramedics after his fall from a ladder at his house. Yes, his attempt to put those Christmas light fixtures up for Mitzi around their house, way up on the second level no less, was not successful. Now, Maggie's mother had more to worry about than how her house looked at Christmas time compared to other houses in the neighborhood. She now had to care for her disabled husband. As the ambulance sped off to the hospital, Missy rode in the back of the vehicle where Matthew was as it rushed through downtown Flint to the county hospital on the edge of the city. Maggie and Fred did their best to follow the emergency vehicle to the hospital in their car, but they could not keep up. Fred drove as fast as he could while observing traffic laws. He had to drive within the speed limit and made several stops at red lights he encountered. "Be careful, Fred," Maggie admonished him as they rushed to get to the hospital as soon as possible. In one instance of their drive, Maggie let out several screams as Fred just missed running into another vehicle. "Oh, Fred! Oh, Fred! Fred! You almost hit that car." Only the sound of the vehicle's blowing horn saved another disaster on that day, as Fred swerved to avoid a collision. Maggie continued to say in response to that occurrence, Fred, I told you to be careful." After that experience, Maggie tried to calm down her husband as much as possible, so at least they could arrive at the hospital safely. Meanwhile, back in the ambulance, Mitzi continued to comfort Matthew as she could sense that the traffic was heavy and could feel the vehicle's speed increase as it rushed to its destination. But it couldn't get to the hospital fast enough for Mitzi, given the condition of her husband. Why can't they go faster? She asked herself, still in shock at what happened. The paramedic sitting on the other side of Matthew and overhearing her concern said to her, "We'll be there soon, miss." "Okay, sir." She realized that the driver was doing the best he could to get Matthew to where he could receive medical attention. Mitzi then laid her head on her husband's chest and said, Matthew. Okay, Matthew, you hang in there. You're going to be just fine. And don't worry about hanging those icicle lighting fixtures. You're all I care about." To somehow ease her pain, Missy started to hum. After humming for a while, Missy continued talking to Matthew, although she was unsure whether he was aware of her statements or not. She just sat there holding his hand, continuing to hum an old gospel song that she had heard back at Mark Methodist. Shortly after that, they arrived at the hospital. Maggie and Fred had fallen far behind the ambulance in their drive, but eventually they reached the hospital, well behind Mitzi and the injured Matthew.
What's your name?
When Maggie and Fred finally arrived at the hospital, They found that the front of the emergency entrance was filled with ambulances flashing their lights, indicating many had been brought there to receive medical care, like Matthew. They noticed that some who were there had been injured. Fred thought to himself, those who are brought here are possibly in a life-threatening circumstance. Maggie and Fred parked their car as close as they could to the emergency entrance. They found a convenient park, then went into the building and the lobby area. As they were now inside, they tried to find Mitzi, who had arrived minutes earlier.
Okay, welcome back. We're going to have some comments now about the story that you just seen, the audio visuals. And do you have any comments? Anyone have any comments about what you've just seen? And Al, especially, what do you see in what you produced? And for those of you who may not have been here when we indicated that Al Hurd is here today, and he produced the audio visuals that you just seen. So, but anyone with any comments? Anyone?
It brings everything to life, so it's good, very good.
Well, Sherry, I believe you had some positive comments about these audio visuals before. As a matter of fact, I remember asking you, or at least you brought it up, if you remember. So Al, you have some admirers, and
Thank you.
But
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, this is Pat Jones. And I want to say too, I'm happy to finally meet the mastermind behind all these videos, the visuals. And I think you do a fantastic job. And yeah, I'd really like to have your contact information.
Okay, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
Great. Okay, we're going to go ahead with the questions, the audio questions for part one. And as before, most of these, I would think that you all know the answer. The first question is, what caused Maggie to scream as she and Fred drove to the hospital following Mitzi and Matthew in the ambulance? Was it A, Fred almost fainted while driving? B, Fred nearly drove into another vehicle? Or C, Maggie had flashbacks to an earlier time with her father, so she ended up losing her calm with a scream? So which one was it?
B.
B. Okay. Well, I assume that everybody would agree with that.
Mhm.
And B is the answer. Of course, Fred nearly drove into another vehicle. Okay, question two. With Missy sitting on one side of Matthew, who was sitting on the other side of him as the ambulance sped to the hospital? Was it a nurse, A, B, a paramedic, or C, a minister?
B.
Yeah.
B, a paramedic.
Mhm.
That's correct. Okay, question number three. What was Mitzi doing when holding Matthew's hand as they were on their way to the hospital? Was it A, talking with the paramedic, B, praying, or C, humming a song?
C.
C.
C, humming a song. That is correct. Number four, where was the hospital located when Matthew was taken there in an ambulance under the care of the paramedics? Was it A, the edge of the city, B, in the downtown area, or C, only 3 blocks from where Mitzi and Matthew lived?
Hmm.
Is that a little bit more challenging for you all? You know, in these multiple choice questions, the process of elimination and figure out which ones definitely would be incorrect. And
Because
Is
I
there
was
a-
like, whoa, I was like, ooh.
Is there a D? Is there a D as in David?
no, it's let's see.
It's
Actually, it was the edge of the city. Now, let me say this. I'm not sure if this was brought out. I believe it was, but I'm not sure if it was brought out in the audio visuals. But it was brought out in the book. And let me just say that Al is somewhat selective, and so there may be some things that was not brought out. And this may have been one of them, but it was the edge of the city.
Okay.
That is the answer. All right. Okay. So now, any comments about the audio questions, or are there other questions that you would have liked to have answered or asked? Anyone? Pretty much satisfied with the questions that were asked?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's move on to podcast 105, part 2, Aftermath to Disaster. And here it is. Okay.
William,
Hang on.
does Matthew have health insurance?
I'm assuming he does. Yes.
That's the most important thing, I think, is does he have insurance or does he know the doctors personally?
Right. I don't think he knows the doctors, but I would assume he has health insurance. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's move on to part 2.
Yes, Maggie and Fred had arrived at the hospital to see Matthew. After scanning over the reception area, they finally spotted Mincy sitting with her head down, obviously devastated from what had happened. Mincy looked up and said, "I'm glad you two made it. I saved 2 seats for you." "What did they say? Where have they taken Daddy?" Maggie asked her mother. Maggie hoped to get an answer that would satisfy her anxiety somewhat. Maggie wanted assurance that Matthew was getting the care he needed. Then Mincy answered her daughter. "Maggie, they've taken your father to the patient waiting area, and an attendant said doctors would see him as soon as they can. But they could not give me a time when they would return to tell me how he's doing. They all just sat there and waited, and waited, and waited. They waited for the doctors to return to give them something positive about Matthew's condition. As the hour grew late, there was less and less activity in the emergency waiting area. The area that was once filled with several injured and ill patients being brought in, some on stretchers and others walking around unassisted, was now so quiet that an eerie feeling seemed to permeate the room. It was a little after midnight when Maggie, Mincy, and Fred were doing their best to keep their eyes open. The rumble of thunder and pounding rain against the windows was evidence the storm that was predicted earlier had arrived. Maggie and Fred had hoped to be back home in the Chicago area when the worst of the storm hit, but they were not thinking about that now. But at this time, their focus was not on the weather or their trip back home. Their concern was only for Matthew. For Fred's part, he almost worried himself to sleep thinking about Matthew's condition. He felt some guilt about the comments he made to Matthew earlier about how ridiculous he looked with that helmet on. But Fred also realized that the helmet Matthew decided to put on probably saved his life when he fell. Fred had grown to love Matthew over the years. It goes way back earlier when he was dating Maggie long before they were married. Now he could only hope and pray Matthew would be all right. Meanwhile, Mincy and Maggie sat on a couch covered by a blanket provided by hospital personnel. They were able to lean on each other and doze off a little as the night wore on. Just before they went into total slumber, a doctor came into the lobby area to relay some news about Matthew's condition. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dr. Taylor." "Well, how is he?" she asked anxiously. The doctor told them what they did not want to hear. "I'm afraid I have some bad news," he said, addressing Nancy directly. "Your husband has a broken spleen and nerve damage, which means that he is paralyzed from the lower back down." "Oh no!" Maggie shouted before the doctor could finish his statement. "No, Daddy! No, Daddy! He can't walk?" she asked, crying uncontrollably. Maggie grieved her father's condition. Missy wasn't doing much better as she tried to console her daughter. At that point, in a sense, it was like the blind leading the blind. Both of them were torn emotionally. "Go ahead, doctor," she told him while her arms firmly held Maggie. "Finish what you were telling us." Then he continued, "Well, the good news is that the prognosis isn't final. There is hope. We will need to determine if surgery can help the problem without endangering his life. But it won't be until about a week from now before we can make that determination. In the meantime, I recommend all of you return home and get some sleep. We will keep Mr. Downs here at the hospital for further examination and prepare him for his return home, hopefully within a week or so. But we anticipate him being here for a while. So, as I said, in about a week, we'll have more definitive news for you about his long-term prognosis." "Okay, doctor," Missy responded. "I guess there's nothing we can do now." With that, Dr. Taylor turned and started to walk away from them. Then Missy asked if she could see her husband one last time before they all left for the night. Missy, Maggie, and Fred followed the doctor to a room where Matthew was resting. As the three of them came near Matthew, only Fred, while regretting making fun of Matthew earlier, seemed to be holding up well with the devastating news that had been delivered to them. On the other hand, both women had tears in their eyes as they approached him. They all were finally in the room with Matthew. As he was awake and seemed to be alert, Missy finally said to him, "Hello, honey. You're looking well. How are you doing?" Before Matthew could answer, Missy turned and put her arms around Maggie, who was standing just behind her. Missy then whispered to her daughter, "Calm down, Maggie," recognized her daughter was visibly upset at what she was saying. "We don't want to make your father upset." After those words, Missy turned back to face Matthew and once more asked him, "How are you?" "I'm fine, Missy," he assured her. "I'm sore all over. All over, that is, except for my bottom parts," he told her. Apparently, Matthew was unaware of the diagnosis the doctor had just given Missy, Maggie, and Fred. He did not know the lack of feeling in his lower extremities was because of his paralysis, and he seemed to be bewildered at the somber look on their faces. Matthew's concern led him to ask his daughter a question. "Little girl, why are you crying like that? Cheer up. There's nothing but positives around here." Then Missy said to her husband, "You know how emotional Maggie gets sometimes, honey. And besides, we're all concerned about you." As Matthew laid there, he did see the concern on their faces. He wanted to assure them that everything would be all right. Yes, Matthew's faith was working for him that night. Matthew was weak, physically, at the time, but his spirit was as strong as ever. He only desired to transfer that feeling of inner strength that he had to those standing around him, his wife, daughter, and son-in-law. Yes, in his apparent weakness, Matthew displayed and wanted to transfer that strength to them, that inner strength from above, despite his adversity. He remembered the words of the Apostle Paul when he said in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 10, "Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So yes, Matthew was the stronger person in the room that day, despite his apparent weakness, his physical weakness. He realized that despite their feelings for him, he had to be the stronger person spiritually. He remembered what the scripture says in Romans chapter 15 and verse 1. We then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak and not to please ourselves. Yes, on that day, it was Matthew that was the stronger person, and he knew that it was his responsibility to care for them. Well, that's all for today. And in closing, always remember, whatever you may be going through in life, whether it's good or bad, just keep in mind that there's always more good things coming your way. We'll see you next time.
Okay, so are there any comments about the story, part 2, or the audio visuals portraying the story? Anybody have any comments? If not, we can move on to the questions, the audio questions for part 2. And the first one is, which of the following did not describe the weather that was occurring outside the hospital where Matthew was being treated? A, there was the rumble of thunder. B, it was raining. Or C, there was sharp flashes of lightning. So which one of these did not occur in your estimation? Anyone want to hazard a guess if you're not sure?
C.
Yeah.
Which one?
C too.
C. Mhm.
C. That's correct. There was no indication that there was lightning, but there was a lot of rain and there was some thunder. Okay. Question 2. After the examination, what did the doctor tell Mincy when Matthew was first taken to the hospital? A, Matthew's legs were broken. B, Matthew was paralyzed from the lower back down. Or C, Matthew was not seriously injured.
B.
B.
B. Okay. That is correct. And number 3, among all the persons that were in the hospital room with Matthew, which one displayed the greatest strength spiritually? Was it Fred, B, Mitzi, C, Maggie, or D, Matthew?
Matthew.
Matthew.
Yeah.
Fred was strong, probably stronger than Mitzi or Maggie, as it was told in the story, but spiritually speaking, Matthew stood above everyone, even though he was the worst off physically because of his injury. Okay, question 4. Matthew's spirit was strengthened because of which of the following? Was it because of Mincy being by his side? B, the doctor who examined him? Or C, his faith?
His face.
C.
His faith. That is correct. Okay, so again, are there any comments about the audio questions, or are there any questions that you would have loved to have asked and then answered? Anyone? If not, we'll move on to the driving question. Now, the driving question today is one that came from the August meeting. Those of you who were at that meeting will remember that we did not get to the driving question because of technical difficulties. So we're going to ask the driving question for August today. And that question is, how important is it to remain positive and to expect God's blessings even in negative situations? Who want to tackle that one?
I would say it's very important that we remain positive and expect God's blessing, even in negative situations, because in life, we're not promised that everything will be lovely and comfortable and easy to be lived out. But God doesn't waste anything in our lives. Romans 8:28 tells us that all things work together for good to those that love God, to those that are called according to his purpose. So even in the midst of storms and difficulties that come in our life itself is a test, but it's an open book test. We can go to the word of God and find the encouragement that we need. And so we know that God is working things out. We may not be able to see around the corner, but when we read God's word, we're assured that nothing takes God by surprise. And so the things that happen to us, we know no matter how bad it may seem, that it still had to come through God, and God is still in control of the situation and of our lives.
Okay, great. Anyone else would like to chime in on this? If not, I'd like to share this verse of scripture with you, Proverbs 17 and verse 22. And it says, a merry heart does good like medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. So obviously the scripture is saying here that it's much better to be positive and to be merry, for your heart to look at things in a favorable way. Although obviously in the society we live in, it's challenging to do that. But if we do have a merry heart, it promises that it will act as a medicine. So somehow I think it's a good idea to do that, regardless of the situation. Now, the benefits of laughter, that's one way we could be merry. And I was looking at the internet, and this is what the internet says about laughter. Laughter decreases stress hormones and increases immune cells and infection-fighting antibodies, thus improving your resistance to disease. And laughter triggers the release of endorphins, the body's natural feel-good chemicals. Endorphins, if I pronounce that correctly, promote and what was that?
Endorphins.
Okay, promote and excuse me, an overall sense of well-being and can even temporarily relieve pain. Now, I'd like to share something today, and that is our friend, our new participant tonight, Al, is actually a comedian. Is that correct, Al? At least you've done that in the past. Have you done stand-up?
Well, I am now. I'm a comedian for the last 30 seconds. Thanks, William.
I tell you what, I remember a program we attended. It may have been 3 or 4 years ago, and I think.
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, I have done stand up.
Yeah. So anyway, whether you're a stand-up comedian, you don't have to be. But the point is that it's best if you not let stress enter your life, because you will end up much better off physically. That's the whole idea.
One thing I'd add to the benefits of laughter is that the way it spreads is that you're in a group and you have to be open to the laughter, but it really helps when you hear other people laugh. And when you hear that, we impulsively want to join in. It's a natural reaction, and the humor doesn't even have to be superbly funny, or it doesn't have to be the kind of humor that we want most of the time, whatever makes us laugh the most. It's just being open to hearing the other people laugh. And I really encourage people, to be in groups and to just be open to how it spreads.
That's certainly a different perspective, listening to other people laugh and de-stress themselves, when the fact of the matter is that in many cases we need to release stress. But that's one way of doing it. There's no doubt about it. And I'd like to refer to another scripture, Matthew 6 and verse 25. This is what Jesus says: therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more important than food and the body more important than clothing? So again, it's best not to worry, and even better than that, to release stress from your life. And going even a step further is to laugh as much as you can. And so now the next question, driving question, and this driving question is for this month, October. And it involves this situation. Given the extent of Matthew's injuries, Missy had regrets about encouraging him to hang the Christmas light fixtures near the roof of their house in bad weather. So the question is it possible to live a life without having regrets about our actions? As apparently Missy had, because she allowed Matthew to go up on the ladder and ultimately have the accident that he had. Any thoughts about that? To look back, especially things that we've done already. Any questions or any comments, I should say, about that?
Well, just based on my experiences, I know sometimes I struggle with this, and I've learned I have to accept it, acknowledge it, and then I move on. Yes, sometimes you regret, but you can't stay there. You have to acknowledge it and move on and learn from the experience.
Okay, certainly you don't need to stay there in an area of regret, because this is kind of like worry, I believe. In other words, when you regret something, it means that you're worrying about it still, regardless of how long in the past it's been since the action occurred. So that's certainly true. Anyone else?
I would say, living life, we know that there is no undo button, and certainly we don't see around the corner, as I said before, but God surely does. And we won't always make the right decision, but when we acknowledge a decision that wasn't right, I think the best thing for us to acknowledge is the motive behind it. Certainly Mincy would not have asked Matthew to do what she asked him if she had known the result that would come from it. But we reflect and we learn from the mistakes or the poor judgment maybe that we make sometime. We learn to grow from it, that if that situation comes up again, we have the past as a reminder to choose a better alternative. And then we just let it go, because like I said, we don't have an undo button that we can change anything, but we learn from it, grow from it, and let it go.
Okay, good. Okay, well, let's move on. In Philippians chapter 3 and verse 13, Paul is speaking to us, and he gives us some advice. He begins to say that, brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it. But then he says, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead. So one way we can avoid having regrets is looking forward, continuing to look forward ahead. And in doing that, we will at least minimize anything that we may otherwise would have regretted doing that was in the past. Okay. So any other comments about the driving question? Okay. Well, now we have testimonies, and this is my favorite point in the meeting, because we get a chance to indicate what God has done over the last few days, over the last week or 2 weeks, or even further back than that. So does anyone would like to share what experience he or she has had over the last few days or weeks in terms of divine help?
I have a quick testimony from this past week that I was sharing you, that I was talking about earlier. And Al, to your point, that last comment on looking back, I definitely take heed to that. I don't even use my rear view mirror when I drive.
I'll talk to you about that later.
Father worked up.
get what you're saying, but that's funny.
Uh-oh.
I'm not a comedian, but I just thought, Al, when you talked about laughing. But I do want to have a testimony, and if I can share my screen, I hope I can get this right. I hope I can get this right. Let's see. If I share my screen, can everybody see this? Everybody see my screen, my actual
Yes.
my laptop.
Yes.
Okay. And so on this past week, we celebrated my father's birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Well, I'm very touched, Panya.
Nice.
Thank you.
That's nice.
Everybody, I did not expect that. I really didn't.
Surprise.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, thank you. I did not expect that. I really didn't. So anyone else would like to share a testimony, recent or the distant past? Could I share one?
Sure.
This happened about a month and a half, maybe a couple of months ago. I go out every day, and we live in Garner, and oftentimes I go to Raleigh. And on my way back on this particular day, I was driving along a 2-lane road, and I guess about half a mile in front of me, I saw a truck coming toward me with looked like some waste baskets in the back of the truck, large waste baskets. And anyway, what happened was that just before the truck met me, going in the other direction, the waste baskets fell off his truck. Apparently, he did not have them secured on the back of his truck. But the thing is that 2 of these, and I think there were 3 or 4, but at least 2 of these came over in my lane. And but it happened only after the truck had passed me, and I saw all of this in my rear view mirror. This is when the waste baskets fell off of his truck, just as he passed me, and I saw all of this in the rear view mirror, and I saw the baskets, the trash cans and waste baskets fall into the lane I was in, but I had already passed the truck. So with no shoulder, by the way, to the right. So I didn't have an opportunity. If this would have happened prior to the truck passing me and the waste baskets falling off the truck, I could not move over to my right because there was no shoulder. But fortunately, the truck passed me, and in my rear view, speaking of rear view mirrors that Panya said she does not use, I saw these waste baskets fall off this truck, and they, at least a couple of them, and they were huge, went over into the lane that I was in, that I had just driven from. And so I definitely feel that that was a divine situation, because if that had happened before the truck had passed me, of course, the trash cans or the waste baskets would have fallen into my lane, into my path, and literally I wouldn't have anywhere to go. I guess I could have continued moving forward, but I would have ran into these things, and I definitely could have made a right, veered off to the right, because there was no shoulder. So anyway, I didn't want to go over to the left because I would be going over into the other lane and not knowing what was coming. So anyway, that happened about maybe a couple of months ago, and I feel that that was I had divine help with that. So that's my testimony for the week. Anyone else? Before we move on, and we have about 6 or 7 minutes left, so we have time for a quick testimony. Anybody?
I'll share real quick. I've had a few, but I like to one in particular. There's I always like to meet people one-on-ones, and really is to give value. So I always like to see what I can do for them. You know, just to see, right, to see, you know, it's a win-win situation. I'm not out to sell or anything like that in what we do. So I was in a position where it was through a networking. We talked offline just to see, you know, just to see who they are and what she's doing, and how I can help, right? Well, come to find out, she was actually in career transition. And I have some networks of individuals that actually help in that department. So other than recruiters, because she was actually having some bad experiences with recruiters. And we had a, you know, brief conversation and good one-on-one. And all I kept thinking was, you know, is that nudge of who in my network I can connect her with. So I was able to connect her with this one in particular that works with individuals in career transition. And if he can't help, he is very genuine with his time, and he could actually guide her to whatever next steps that he could think of. So I was able to connect them well, and she thanked me immensely of like, you know, I think this was like such a great connection. Thank you so much, because it led her to the next step of her transition for finding a job. So it just makes me feel good when those connections come together, and it's a good thing.
Great, great. That's a great testimony.
I'm in this fitness group. Well, one, you have to be, I don't know how I ended up in this group. You have to be 50 plus, male or female, but this other group is just all females. And it's been really, really touching. We do different things. We have exercise challenges. We have inspirational moments, like the book club says, inspirational book club. So this month, what they come up, we do recipes, we do a lot of things. And this month, what she's come up with, since it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, she decided we're only on day 9, but it's been very, very inspirational and inspiring. And what you do is you submit, if you have like breast cancer survivor, you have cancer or a family member. And what's going on is every month we call them queens. Every day we select a queen. You give her a personal message. And this is day 9, and it's just been so touching in how we're inspiring each of the ladies that's going through something, or if they have a family member. And it's been very, very touching. I don't know how I'm going to make it through the rest of the month, because what she'll do is she'll put their story. You do a private message to it, and she'll do the picture and the story. And what we do is go in there and do chats to inspire that lady, inspire her to go on. They're doing like if you've lost a child in childbirth or whatever. So this has been like a touching moment where we're reaching out to other people, and it's just kind of like really, really touching our fellow sisters, to encourage them to know that they're not alone. And this is day 9. I'm like, okay, can I make it to the end of the month? But just sharing with other ladies that we have your back. We're thinking about you, and the testimonies that we get back through our little chat. But that's what's going on. And that's been just very, very inspirational. And the lady that's the author of the group, she just come up with some amazing ideas. And she was like, okay, we need, if it's a family member or if it's anyone, if you're a person going through something, and we've been able to touch each other and agree that you're not going alone. You're not going through this alone. So that's been my little thing. But y'all pray for me that I get through the rest of them and not have the ugly cry and just do the cute cry. Oh, it gets kind of touching, and never know what people are going through. And so many of them had, some that already had, lost an infant or a child or whatever. But anyway, so y'all just pray that I get through and I don't do the ugly cry.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Sharing that, Yvonne, that's so touching, and that's so needful, especially since we have gone through this long transition of this COVID period where we've been separated from each other, to come back again and to be able to touch each other through stories and things like that we've experienced is important for our emotional healing from all the isolation. So that's wonderful.
Okay. Well, that's great. That is great. Anybody else, by the way? And
I don't have a testimonial, but I just want to thank Sherry, because I did speak to Sherry offline, and you put me in touch with another realtor, which was great. And I know the last time we met, I think it was August, that I said I didn't know if I was going to go back to corporate America or if I was going to stay as a realtor. But talking to Sherry made me, and talking to the other realtor that she referred me to, I'm going to another company. But Pat, I am going back to corporate America, but not to look to move up in the ranks, but I have to stay there for a bit. But I just want to say, I really enjoy this group, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Maurice. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and finish the program. Time is waning, and so you all just stay with us, okay? We'll be right back. Okay. There are some announcements I'd like to make. First of all, our next meeting will be November the 6th. Now, last week was the first Saturday of October, but me and Yvonne had a family event last weekend and we were not able to meet. This is why we're meeting today, the second Saturday in October. But in November, we'll be going back to the first Saturday of that month, which is the 6th. And it's going to be a special time because it's going to be the first of two holiday meetings in November and December. Of course, November celebrating Thanksgiving and December Christmas. And we're going to be discussing, if I can get back to it, we're going to be discussing a new book, Life in the Spirit. Now, this is the first book that I've written. It's nonfiction, and we'll be talking about the stories in chapters 1 and 2. And if I don't have your mailing address, make sure that I have your mailing address so that you will get a copy of this book. I can mail you a copy of the book if you don't have a copy already. And because this is what we'll be discussing next month. And this is the front and the back cover of Life in the Spirit, True Stories of Blessings, Favor, and Interventions. And again, we'll be discussing chapters 1 and 2. Now, we will come back after December to Heaven Can't Wait or Can It, the sequel, and resume our discussion of what Maggie and her friends are going through in the sequel. So and you don't want to miss any of the stories that we have in store for you in the months of January, February, and beyond. Now, at some point in 22, we will finish the sequel. It'll probably be later in the year, but eventually we'll get to our next novel in this series, which is Heaven Can't Wait or Can It, the Fruition. And if you'd like to get a copy to get a head start as far as reading is concerned, you can do that. Obviously, you can always get a copy from Amazon.com, and you can get a copy from me if you don't want to pay the tax and the shipping charges. And if you know anyone else who would like to join us, just have them email me, William Porter, at waporter4995@yahoo.com, and I'll gladly get to them a meeting ID and a passcode. So it's good to have had all of you here today, and especially Al Herr. I think he was the only one that's new today. Actually, I anticipated a couple of other people. I think Panya said that someone would have come, but apparently they couldn't be here today. And but I'd like to just leave this point with you. If you're going through something that you would not like to be going through, just keep in mind that there is always more good things coming your way. And so we'll see you all the next time.
Mark 11:23 and 24. For assuredly, I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that those things he says will be done, he will have whatever he says. Therefore, I say to you, whatever things you ask when you pray, believe that you receive them, and you will have them. Romans chapter 8 and verse 28. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. John chapter 11 and verse 26. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? Whatever you may be going through, whether it's good or bad, just remember that there's always more good things coming your way.